We've heard quite a bit throughout the 2 days of the conference so far about sustainability. In fact, the CEO of Sports Singapore mentioned very early on, he spoke about us thinking beyond the event space and thinking beyond and how our events are connecting with the rest of our stakeholders' lives. That's what this panel is going to be talking about. We're talking about sustainability, the sustainability of the events industry into the future. When our group here first met up via Skype to discuss what we were going to talk about and how we were going to approach this, we decided that we would use the UN, the United Nations definition of sustainability, because it's always a grey area, which is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, of course, sustainability mostly is considered to have three dimensions: economic sustainability or financial, social and cultural, and environmental. Now, because we've only got 30 minutes here, we're going to concentrate our discussion on the environmental sustainability aspect. So what I'm going to do is start by asking our three panellists what's actually happening out there already. What are you seeing out there? Or is there positive things happening, or are event managers saying, no, it's just too costly, we're just not going to go down there? So Lee-Seng, you've, from Singapore here, you've got a bit of skin in the game in this space. Would you like to tell us what you're seeing happening?
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. We have been trying to work with event organizers, title sponsors, to try and reduce the waste that's generated at large-scale events, marathons in particular. So we've been doing about 10 over of them this year right now. And what we're noticing is that there are actually event organizers who are keen to try and to put on to look at the sustainability front in a big way. We do have lots of companies who are also keen to work with us to try and reduce waste at these events. I think this includes the title sponsors as well as the various partners that are part of the event. So that's a healthy growth that we see in Singapore. But at the same time, we also acknowledge that event organizers are also trying to look at this from a cost perspective. It does cost a bit more if you like to look at recycling, for instance, in Singapore. Some of the infrastructures in place some infrastructures are not in place in some of the venue areas. So while there are actually companies who like to do more, there is also a concurrent need to pay more, which to some companies and some sponsors, this is actually not. You're not ready for it at the moment, but we're still trying to work on it.
So there's some progress, but not sufficient yet.
Yeah.
Alessio, what about you're representing an international industry body? What are you seeing happening?
Well, more than the industry body, we are the association entrusted by the IOC as the governing body of the sport. That doesn't mean that we do not operate events directly. Well, we do, yeah. But that is, if you wish, is a huge add-on to our core of activities. It's surely become the biggest part of what we do, but it's not what ultimately we are for. So in this dual role that we have and we see two very distinct sets of activities. When it comes to the event organization side of things, as the organizer of what sometimes is pointed to as the third, fourth biggest sporting event in the world, there is certainly something we have to do there to show leadership. Some years back, we started working with the Council for Responsible Sport to develop together with them a certification scheme for sustainability, for responsibility in sport. And we have achieved ourselves the Council for Responsible Sport certification for a couple of events. Then the organization has gone through some wavy times, and the whole thing had shifted out of sight for a while. But this year, recently, we relaunched a partnership with the UNEP, which is the UN Environmental Protection Agency, aimed mainly at clean air. And then there is a second, and this will be connected to our own events, and to the events in which we have a direct role, such as Diamond League, track and field meets. Then when it comes to the administration side of things, our role is to provide leadership in a way. And leadership to who? We are an association of 214 national associations, so there is definitely space for us to influence there.
Right.
Sustainability is not necessarily at the center of what they do. It changes a lot from country to country, and it also changes a lot from event to event, because we also have a network of privately organized events that sort of belong to a series that we have launched 10 years back. And in this space, yes, it changes from country to country, from organizer to organizer. As you and I were chatting the other day on the whys of sustainability more than the hows, given that we are not, unlike your companies, we are not doing as much as you do.
You're the leaders,
Exactly.
you're seeing yourself as the leaders and the influencers.
Yes, that's right. And the why is because without sustainability, there simply is no sport. As you said, the UN definition of sustainability is providing for today's citizens' needs without compromising those of the futures. Now, the sports, the running, the mass participation ecosystem is very, very healthy, but how do we make sure that it stays healthy? You know, what if 10 years from now, 15 years from now, new studies start coming, and we realize that it's no longer healthy running marathons in big cities? We will have lost a number of, we will have lost fans of the sport, and ultimately we will have failed of our constitutional mission to be the guardians of the sport.
And we won't have a sport.
Well, we won't have a sport. There are even more extreme cases. The International Ski Federation is particularly big on this, because if due to the climate change there is no more snow on the slopes, there simply is no more sport of ski. And same applies to the Mountaineering Association, same applies to the Water Sports Federation, and so on and so forth.
Gemma, what about you? You're from the UK and from a private industry background. What are you seeing in the space?
So, I mean, it's been really interesting for us. I think when London won the Olympic bid, there was an acknowledgement that, you know, events obviously, by the very nature of them, you know, will have a social and economic and an environmental impact. So I think that was where the BS 8901 standard came into play, which was about a management system.
Sorry, could you just explain what BSA is?
Yes, it's a British standard, and it's basically a management system for the event industry, basically to help them improve the sustainability of their event-related activities, and really looking about how you can be financially successful, how you can reduce your environmental footprint, and also be more socially responsible. So I think that was hugely popular, and that then moved into an international standard, which is the ISO 2012-1, which is something certainly Limelight sort of follow our processes. And as we approach every event, we create a stakeholder management tool, and within that tool we look at the social, economic and environmental objectives, the issues that are relative to that event, and then the actions as to how we're going to respond to those. So that's an approach that we build into every campaign that we do, so that we are looking at what our impact is. I think it's been really interesting this year with the whole plastic piece. That's obviously massively at the forefront of everybody's minds at the moment, and certainly in some of the events that we deliver at Limelight, we're now looking to move our water stations on running events into cups rather than plastic bottles, which is something that we've been doing for years. But it's a really interesting situation, because actually, you know, some of our audience were like, we don't really understand why, if you recycle all your plastic bottles, are you getting rid of plastic bottles? How is cups better than plastic bottles? And, you know, actually, if you're talking about a recycling point of view, what we're having to do around the cups and the bowsers that we're bringing in, the setup of the cups potentially is going to have a bigger environmental footprint attached to that than what we did with the bottles. But the plastic piece is such a newsworthy piece at the moment, and obviously we just want to reduce it. And I think that's where we distinguish between the two. Is one is about, it's not about recycling, it's about just eliminating it and reducing it. And
yeah, that's exactly right, because you know, we talk a lot about reducing and recycling, but actually there's another R: remove. Actually, just eliminate. Don't have it in the first place. And Lisa, you were talking yesterday about every shirt coming in an individual plastic packet for the event. my view is that we need to start talking with our sponsors and our other stakeholders about thinking about that first R of remove, not just the reduce and the recycle piece. So are you seeing anything in that space?
Yeah, I mean, currently, I mean, a lot of items that are given out are actually wrapped in plastic packaging, and it's really quite shocking. In the recent races that we've been working with, they're giving out items that we thought it was optional in the past, but they're giving out foam rollers, sunglasses, and things like that. And this was really quite, and each of them came along all packed in plastic packaging. And when we were stationed, so for Green Nudge, what we do is at the end of the event, we are stationed at the finishing point. We encourage the participants to bin the items properly in a responsible manner, and we segregate them accordingly. And that's where we observe that there were so many items that are being thrown away that we thought things like towels and even some of the events, even the medals were even thrown away. So that's really quite shocking to us.
What?
And
you run a marathon and then you give your medal away?
Yeah, but I think that's where we feel that that's actually a way for us to be able to work with the sponsors now to say that, hey, based on our observation, that there are actually room for us to improve. If you're looking at trying to reach out to brand your company in a positive manner, there are actually other alternatives available. Not understanding balancing the need between the environment as well as the commercial front, there is a way for you to green the event in a positive light and still generate the publicity that your company wish to desire as well. And I think that's where the event organizers should also have the courage to say, let's do away with some of this single-use plastics or the packaging. So there are some companies that we're working with right now that are very keen to remove all plastic packaging in the shirts. They come in all packed together and they'll give it out during the event itself, or they'll eliminate all with just paper-based items. So in Singapore, recycling is not that well done. Only 6% of all these plastics in Singapore are recycled. 2%, we have a national recycling program, and only 2% is properly recycled, and that's really quite shocking. So to us, that means we have to really start reducing before we can even look at recycling in the first place.
Yeah, I know in the UK, Gemma, there's some very innovative stuff happening in the recycling area, but even that, there's still a massive problem to be dealt with.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're certainly really keen to do is just an education piece. I think as
Absolutely.
event organisers, we're going to be looking at making lots of changes and looking at the impact that we have and how we can sort of make improvements from a sustainability point of view, but we want to take our participants on that journey with us. So everything that we are doing, we will be taking them with us, and that's the same with our suppliers and our sponsors and everybody, because it is going to be drawing on all resources and how we all work together. And there's specialisms, everyone's got their own specialism. We as event organisers are not sustainability experts. We have an understanding of what we can do better. It's how we work with our suppliers and basically say to them, this is our ambition. We want to be free of plastic, or we want to be more sustainable. We want to, looking at branding, how can we use materials that are more sustainable. But we need our suppliers' support and expertise to help us on that journey. And I think we can achieve amazing things as an industry, but we need to all work together to do that.
And that's where probably you, Alessio, in your role, can have enormous influence as a leader, as an industry leader, and an influencer.
Well, it depends from places to places. In a mature market like the US or Western Europe, to an extent. But I keep getting all the time emails from medium-sized marathon organizers in Asia and South America asking, dear IAAF, do you have a race organization manual? Our federation would like to organize a marathon. We heard that you can make a lot of money by organizing marathon. Can you help us? Can you help us doing that? And we used to have, and we've developed this resource in collaboration with AIMS, the Association of International Marathon Races. We used to have a manual to guide in the organization of races, in the organization of road races. We are now about to review this manual, and I could very well imagine us plugging into this manual some environmental standards. Now, are we the expert? We aren't, but there's plenty of organizations out there who would really be happy to work with us, simply because thanks to our role, to our centrality, we can influence people who then can in turn influence other people.
And you mentioned the council
For responsible sport.
Responsible
Yes,
sport.
yes.
And Gemma, you mentioned the standard,
Yeah.
ISO standard. So we've now got the beginnings of metrics to be able to measure those impacts and the reduction. Is that?
Well, yes. When it comes to measuring metrics, I don't think it's our role to do it centrally, because always for this difference in national approaches that you have. What we can do is tie the attainment of there is this certification scheme, which probably some of you know, the IAAF label program, in which if you have a marathon, a road race of a certain organizational quality with an elite race of a certain level, you get an IAAF label. And in some markets that is important. It drives, it can drive participation to the event, but it certainly signals to the government and to the sponsors that it's a significant road race. It's an event that matters on the world stage. I could imagine us tying into that in the future some sort of environmental sustainability indicators. So right now, to get a label, you must have a given space at the start line or a minimum number of refreshment stations. It might be the case that in the future, to be able to get a top label, you must have obtained at least, the second best classification provided by associations like the company of the Council for Responsible Sport. And that is how we play our role. Because the moment we started telling to the very many Chinese marathon organizers who want to associate with us, look, very happy to give you the IAAF recognition, but on race day, the air quality is not enough. So you've got to do something, and you have to show us that you've done something before getting it. That might have some impact, yes.
Yeah. As an outsider to the industry, been listening to all the speakers in the panels for the last day and a half, it's a very crowded industry. It's very, very competitive. No pun intended. Is the ability to display that your event, or in your case of Limelight, the events that you organise, that you are running a sustainable event, is that giving a competitive advantage in this very crowded market?
I think that I think you need to believe it. And I think one of the things at the moment is that you see some people doing what might be seen as sort of environmentally friendly initiatives, but actually they're potentially quite gimmicky. And I think from a Limelight,
so they've got a nice message on their website.
Yeah, and what's the substance behind it? Or actually what, you might see some people bring in like bikes, that if you pedal the bikes, that can charge your mobile phone. But actually, have you got the bikes to the site, and what are the bikes actually doing? So it looks great, but behind it, actually the environmental footprint of that activation is negative. Whereas I think what we're really looking at Limelight is how we can genuinely reduce the environmental impact of the events. And the Royal Parks Half Marathon is sort of one of our flagship events, and we started off in 2008 sort of with the green ethos from the very beginning. So our race shirts are made from bamboo and recycled plastic. Our medals are FSC wood. Everything we sort of thought about, we tried to think about how we could reduce that impact. Like discarded clothes in the start line were donated to charity. We had a full recycling strategy in place. But that was kind of in 2008, and now we're however many years on, and the green agenda has moved on so much further. And we know how much more we need to do. And this year we made some great strides in removing 100,000 bottles off the course. We made a decision around isotonic in that we wouldn't provide it. We said to our participants, you guys know what you train with, you bring that with you on race day, we're not going to have these bottles on the course. We worked with new suppliers that we'd never worked with before. There's a water brand called One Water who have it in cartons, so we had that at the finish line rather than plastic bottles. There's an amazing new product called Uho. I don't know if that's made it to this part of the world, but it's basically seaweed packaging. So the water's inside it, and you could effectively eat. It's a very strange sensation.
So you get a 2-course meal.
Yeah, exactly. But you effectively eat your packaging. There's no, and it's something that we trialed this year because we didn't want to put it on the course straight away, because it is something that you kind of need to get used to. But the response from people trialing it was amazing. And I think what we're really getting from our audience is that they've got a real appetite for change, and they want to see events improving their environmental impact. And we got our sponsors on board. Like historically, we always used to produce a race booklet. This year we sort of insisted that that was a digital race booklet, which, you know, when we first said it to them, you could have kind of got this reaction of, but we, you know, this is a bit of sponsor collateral, we need this in people's hands. And we're like, this is the way we're going, join us on this journey. And, you know, actually it was brilliant. We had it in a downloadable format, so if people wanted to print it off, that was possible. But it was just little ways like that of us demonstrating.
Well, let's face it, everybody's got a mobile phone.
Yes, it's in your hand, and it's just a different way of doing it on your phone rather than that. And then our goodie bag, RBC are the title sponsor of the Royal Parks Half, and they produced cloth bags, so like a bag for life as part of your goodie bag. So you'd cross the finish line and you'd get one of these and really beautifully designed cloth bags that people could then put items in. So there were no sort of pre-packed goodie bags filled with things that you didn't want. It was literally pick up a bag that you can continue to use for the rest of your life and choose the items that you want, and just eliminates a huge amount of waste.
Yeah. So Lisa, are you seeing that as well? You're getting more inquiry for your assistance, more push from the stakeholders to be more environmentally sustainable?
Yeah, definitely. We see quite a lot of companies and event organizers that's trying to work with us to try and green the events in Singapore. I mean, beyond that as well, we've also got teammates who are really trying our best to reach out to these companies as well. So I mean, among the audience, I've got very influential lady, Tire lady here. She aims to run. She runs with marathons with a tire, really, to raise awareness on environmental sustainability, and she aims to do 100 marathons by 2020 with a tire, and she's on her 76 right now that she just completed at the Singapore Marathon. And that is also really a good way to really share or be a role model in saying that it can be done, and for whatsoever reason that, you know, that company, event organizers are saying that it's not possible, or for participants who say that it's too inconvenient, it's not possible, she demonstrates that it's very much so. And
it actually is possible.
Yeah.
I was listening this morning to somebody talking about the goodie bag mentality. You know, give me more goodies in my goodie bag. Is that an education piece that we need to work through with our sponsors and other stakeholders? And you know, we've seen all this fantastic technology of photos and apps and every other thing. Is that, do you think, something that we can educate our sponsors and stakeholders in, rather than sticking with the goodie bag mentality? I know when we were chatting yesterday, I spoke about it. There was a TEDx event in Brisbane in Queensland where instead of buying new T-shirts, they actually went round to all the charity shops, bought T-shirts, washed them, printed them, and everybody, there were 400 T-shirts they did like that. So is there a way that we can perhaps educate our sponsors to?
I mean, I think, to be honest, it's partly the participants rather than the sponsors, because I think they, depending on what your entry fee is, they have an expectation of, this is what I get for the money that I've paid. But I think there is certainly an education piece with them as to what is actually a value item. You know, some of the things that go in goodie bags traditionally, it's a load of food samples and leaflets and different things, and you know, that to me, from having taken part in a race, is not going to add to my experience. I want something that, you know, I can take away. You want a memory of your achievement, so that's often like the race shirt and the medal, but then if there was anything extra, you'd want it to be something that you can use again. Or so I think certainly the sponsors that we're working with, we're sort of looking at what could those items be that actually you know, is a takeaway item that you would reuse again. And you know, one of the examples that we've talked about is whether at a running event people get given a running bottle, like the ones you can put your hand in. So actually it's something that could be a branded piece of content, but at the same time it's value for the runners because they will use it. And you know, it's that having something tangible that you can take away, reuse, has a value to it rather than just a load of rubbish in a bag.
Absolutely. We've got a few minutes left, so is there any burning questions of our three panellists? Anybody here got any burning questions? No?
While people come up with questions, here's one.
Sorry.
I was going to say, it'd be nice to hear from each person what
define making a difference.
You define that. It's up to you.
Okay. Well, the way I see it, making a difference is obtaining enough support from your government and obtaining enough and selling enough bips to your runners, enough entries to your runners. And if you ask me to decline this through the sustainability lens, yeah, I would imagine that based on your market, it really, you really have to understand, race organizers have to understand that sometimes less is more, not just because it's a nice catchphrase, but because you are paying for stuff eventually. The way big city marathons work is that you get nothing for free. If you want a finisher t-shirt, you pay for it. You buy it. You add it to your chart when you're registering. If you want a race gear, branded race gear, you buy the expo. You don't get anything for free. And I believe that every race organizer prospected with the possibility of making an additional revenue from that stream, I don't think they would turn it down. Have I answered to your question, or at least is it why impossible?
Sometimes don't do things if
Just don't assume.
Yeah.
Don't assume. And now I'm no longer an event organizer, so I don't know. Perhaps the event organizer should tell us what your view is.
I mean, I think from a Limelight point of view, it's...
Well, you're already doing quite a bit. So
Yeah, and I think education is massive. I think it's communication and education about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and if we can affect behavioural change with our suppliers, with our sponsors, with our participants, I think that will have a much wider impact. So I think that's why the communication is so important, to explain why we're doing things. If we are taking things away from participants that they might have had previously, why are we doing that? And this is the impact of doing it. And actually, you know, when you're training, how about you use a reusable bottle, or if you see litter on the floor, pick it up, or different things like that. And we run different campaigns, like a Green Runners campaign, where we actually incentivize runners to do positive things, you know, whether they go and recycle their trainers, or whether they use locally sourced nutrition, or different things. I think for us, if we can educate and communicate, that will just have a much far-reaching impact than just the events that we
But
put
that's a
on.
very long-term thing. So
Yeah, and
I was thinking the other day, if I sat up here and lit up a cigarette, that would not be socially acceptable.
No.
20 years ago, 30 years ago, that would have been quite socially acceptable. You know, will we get to the point where having a plastic water bottle will be socially unacceptable?
I mean, we were sitting there
Probably.
yesterday, and I had a plastic water bottle on the
I
table.
wasn't picking
No,
on
I
you,
know.
Gemma.
But I felt so guilty that I had this plastic bottle on the table. I'm like, no one should be having a plastic
So
bottle
you-
on the table.
you
I
sort of
was
hid it
like,
behind-
I was hiding it, and it's, you know, I think we absolutely need to understand that this is a multi-year, ever-evolving approach. We are not going to solve this straight away, but I think there are certain wins that are quite easy, and other things which will require a much longer process. And I think that's the journey that Limelight are going on, is sort of looking at gathering all the information from all our suppliers, understanding what our options are, and then building that sustainable strategy moving forward and sharing that with our clients. And, you know, I don't know, people in the room, I think certainly I was talking to Beth Hodge yesterday about actually, as an industry, us all coming together and sharing our findings. And, you know, we've talked about standards and certifications, but actually just a knowledge share and everything of best practice.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that would be an amazing thing for the industry to do proactively.
And sorry.
No, just to finish off on a related note, now we're focusing on events, but if we move the focus away from events, there are other ways through which at least organizations like ours could help,
Yes.
could do their bit for environment. Just
Yeah.
imagine of how simple it would be to develop in selected territories programs to get kids walking, and to teach kids that hey, it's actually fine to walk 3, 4, 5 kilometers to your school, maybe 3 kilometers to your school. These champions that you see on TV winning the 10,000 meters, when they were kids, they were running 15. So perhaps you can do 3, and your mom can not use the car that day.
Yeah.
All these sort of education patterns that need to be started.
And do you think what's your answer to the gentleman's question? What's the one thing
Well, I think
from your whole arsenal? Pick out one thing.
Well, it's really about taking stock about the consumption level at the event itself. So really tracking or creating, I mean, you talk about matrix as well. It can really start from just understanding how much we have been consuming from the event itself. In terms of the waste that's generated. Bananas, for instance, are given out very frequently for events, and it's how many of these are actually being eaten, or how many of them have been generated. So for the event, over the weekend, for the Singapore Marathon, we collected about 800 kg of banana peels out of the event itself. And if we can actually have the matrix and use it as a baseline reference, we can understand how we can improve on it as well. So the 800 kg of banana peels that we have collected was 4 times as much as we collected the previous year as well. And that allows us to then look at how we can improve. Then we can talk about, let's say, also having certifications or standards coming out, because that's where having the matrix now you have better understanding figures that are unique to your event as well.
Okay. Well, that's our challenge, I guess, our challenge as a panel to you. What can you do? Do we have time for one more question? Yes, one more question, please, Rena.
I'd like to stand up for the environment, okay? So what I find here is that with event organisers, I have been speaking to a lot of event organisers, and the things that I get, which are the obstacles, are that we cannot change. For example, I would ask, can you get the participants to carry their own bottle? What is the argument for that? Is that we are going to compromise health and safety? Now, we are talking about less than 1% who actually will chuck their bottles because they are their leads, they are running for money. Okay? The rest of us are doing this for a social cause. We are doing it as a hobby. It doesn't matter. If we have to line up for a glass of water, we can do it. Let's make our personal best different. This is what I have been getting runners to do. I've been getting them here to actually understand how to bin it. Okay, just put their stuff in the bin. All right, so I'm standing up for the environment. There are over 1 million animals dying out in the ocean right now. You guys are telling me that you can't get rid of your plastic bottles because, well, in fact you do. You tell me that you recycle your plastic bottles. Okay? And I'm going to tell you, as Gemma has already told you, that industry is a broken industry. You are all most likely contributing to the 8 million tons of plastic pieces that are in the ocean, because your plastic has been recycled and shipped off to Asia. And it is creating something like this, which is a plastic bottle. Okay, this is a fully recycled, it's 100% plastic bottle, and I swear that when it rips, I'm probably going to chuck it in the bin. Okay?
Thanks, Rena. I think you have 3 kindred souls up here. We can't do everything as Gemma said. This is a multi-generational problem that we have to deal with. And our challenge as a panel to each of you, to everyone here, is what is that one little thing that you can do, as the gentleman asked in his question?
One point. I'm sorry, I came in late, so if you've covered this,
Certainly.
I apologise. You talk about standing up for the environment. I live in India. I think 14 of the top most air polluted cities in the world are in India. China has a lot of them too. It's a real emerging market issue, and you saw that at the Paris Accord. There was a huge controversy with doctors saying they should cancel the events for the health of the participants. Where do we stand on that, and how can that impact sponsors, etc.? I mean, where people are running 26, 42 kilometres, doctors are saying it's not good for them. To what extent can all of us have an impact on the environment by lobbying governments, etc., to deal with what is a major issue? I mean, if you go to Delhi now or Beijing, it's not the place to be doing these sort of things in many ways.
I can't answer because I'm not from within the industry, but from an outsider's point of view, that would, to me, would mean that eventually there will be no event in that country.
But the events are growing. This is the thing, the events are growing. It's an educative thing too. People, there's an argument that running in that weather is worse for you than not running, but we've got to move, and we want our kids to move and all the rest. But it's a real conundrum. But at the end of the day, we're an industry that has impact because we have access to people, and if we're going to stand up for the environment, plastic's one thing, and I get that. And my daughter goes to green school, so I understand that completely, and I'm on board for eradicating plastic. But I think the environment in which we operate these events are very polluted, especially in emerging markets, and I think we've got to address that
So
Also,
the
'cause
environment,
we have an opportunity to have impact.
the environment affects the industry, and the industry affects the environment.
Yeah, I mean, bodies like I mean, again, it's not easy for individual organisations. Maybe bodies like the IAAF have to say, you know, you'll lose your event, Delhi, if you don't get the thing below this, and it's going to go somewhere else, and the economic impact of that will accrue to that organiser. Something has to be done to motivate governments to help organisers to keep events in those
Well,
places.
we cannot not tell them you will lose your event, because ultimately it's not that it's a franchise that I'm taking over to cities. But what happened already in the case of Delhi was that they have moved the dates of their event from November to October to start address. No, so much, but they were aware that it was a big issue in 2017, and they moved the date of the event. What I can do is not giving a label to them, or yeah, but then if Airtel, which is their title sponsor, or whichever other sponsors they have, goes like, look, we need to have a marathon at this time of the year, and I'm going to give you this much money, then it's their decision eventually. No, you're right. With our health and science department, we are trying to produce. We are producing studies in that department to advise on best practices, but it ultimately will be their decision.
I get it. I came from IT. We're all about making money. I understand. But my point is, we need to stand up for the environment every way. But we know you got to be half pregnant on this stuff. If sanctioning bodies take it away from them, then they'll make it move. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's the only little pressure point that we have. Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave it there. Can you thank Ron and Reid and the wonderful panel?